Hello, music lovers. Thanks so much for coming back to this channel. You know, if you like this video, give it one of these. All right. I want to talk today about Phil Collins and Genesis. Did he ruin Genesis? I've seen this question posed on the internet lately. I don't know what's brought this up. I actually don't know what the word ruin means. Like, what do they mean, ruin? Like going pop? You know, we're talking about Genesis. They once were like this progressive rock band doing these big, complicated songs, and you know, then they eventually started doing pop songs. You know, when you get to like Invisible Touch, is that what they mean by ruin? Because when I think of ruining Genesis, I think about Tony Banks and Michael Rutherford going on without Phil Collins and making that Calling All Stations album, which I think is complete garbage. Now, I know that there's fans out there who love everything. Whether I like it or not, or whether you like it or not, there's always somebody that likes something that we hate. And Calling All Stations, to me, is probably the most throwaway Genesis album in the entire catalog. They really should not have gone on thinking that they could pick up and go on and do anything without Phil Collins. At that point, to me, seemed like a big waste of time, and it proved right. I mean, nobody cared. I mean, yeah, they sold out some shows maybe in Europe, but I mean, in the States, they completely lost them. And the album wasn't strong. If they had put out a really good album, I could see, but come on, really. I know you like the album, but come on, it's crap. Now, actually, I think that Phil Collins saved Genesis. I mean, think of what happened. 1975, Peter Gabriel, you know how important he was to that band then, what he meant? And for Phil Collins to come out from behind the drums and start singing, he had never done that kind of thing before. He had only sung on maybe one Genesis song up to that point. The balls that he had to go out in front of the band and sing, and then he'd go back and play some drums, then he'd go back out and sing. And plus he had to fill the shoes of Gabriel, who was like a storyteller on stage. He was kind of a creepy, he was like this creepy wanderer kind of guy, but he had a thing about him where he would tell these weird stories, and so Phil Collins had to kind of pick up the pieces from all of this. And what was brilliant about Collins was that he was able to relate to the audience in kind of a guy next door kind of way. He would tell stories too, but it was his own thing. He kind of made it into his own thing, and he saved them. And he eventually, as we started getting to the latter part of the 70s, he started to write songs. He started to build his confidence. And he started to become an equal strength to Tony and Michael. And before you know it, they were a three-piece writing band. And you can argue about Phil Collins's taste, his leanings towards pop. But, you know, Genesis always was pretty much a Tony Banks-driven band. He rooted that band. The band never lost its prog sense. You know, even on Invisible Touch, they had a 10-minute song with Domino. On We Can't Dance, they had a couple of long songs on there. Fading Lights is a great song. Yeah, it had some pop stuff in there. That's to be expected. I mean, you got Phil, that's where he was at. And quite honestly, if you were a prog rock band and you needed to get through the 80s, you had to have some kind of a connection with the mainstream. You had to have a hit single. I mean, it happened to Yes, you know, with Owner of a Lonely Heart, #1 single, 90125, completely different than what they did just a few years prior in the 70s, but it made the connection. It worked. It re-energized them. Look at Asia, prog rock supergroup. You know, you would have expected that they would have come out with just this mind-blowing prog rock masterpiece kind of thing, and instead they came out with something that was very mainstream, but yet it's still, excuse the mower over there. All right, so yeah, I had to wait for this guy on the tractor to finish so I could hear myself talk. Anyway, I was talking about Asia. Yeah, they, that album was, you know, you would think that album would have been a progressive rock masterpiece based on who was in it, but it turned out to be surprisingly mainstream. You know, that album was like the biggest selling album of 1982. It had John Wetton, Carl Palmer, you know, Steve Howe. It's like, really? But that's what happened. Heat of the moment. Only Time Will Tell. Huge songs made a huge connection to the mainstream audiences. And if you wanted to get through the 80s as a prog rock type band, you had to have a connection. And they were able to find it, as did Genesis. I don't think that Genesis made a misstep. with Phil Collins. I think that their misstep came much later with Calling All Stations in the later part of the 90s. But that's just me. What do you think? What do you think was the biggest misstep that Genesis made? Was it when they let go of Gabriel? Was it when Phil Collins, started to come in with his more pop styles? Or was it when they decided to go on without him? Put your comments below. Very, very curious to hear what you have to say about it. If you like this video, as I said, give it one of these. It helps it along. And I'll see you later.